Hello, everyone. It's Louisa, and I'd like to welcome you to the Feel Good Astrology Great Realization series, where I look at the lives of healers, therapists, intuitives, and practitioners and explore what these unprecedented times has brought to them, their transformational work, and their life in general. Because these times have been called, amongst other things, the Great Pause, the Great Unravelling, and the Great Realization. So it's my great pleasure today to talk with Gillian Alexander about her great realizations. Gillian, hello. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. So I'm loving it. But yes.
So as we get started, can you just give a quick introduction about who you are and what you do?
Okay. Well, I'm Gillian Alexander, obviously, and then I'm based in the west of Scotland. Although I've done quite a lot of travelling around teaching as I've been going various places in the world. But for obvious reasons, a bit more located in my own back garden recently. So my work really is to support people to remember who they are and to clear anything that is lying in their way or standing in their way to embodying their full power and potential. So mostly it's just remembering who they are, because actually when we remember who we are all extraordinary beings, and it kind of takes care of everything. But most of us have got these crazy things in our heads that think otherwise and have forgotten who we are. So that's my main work.
And who are your clients?
Really varied, actually. I don't know, it'd be difficult to male, female. It's a broad, age range, huge. I get people sort of from 20 to I don't think I've ever worked with anybody in their 80s, but 70s certainly. It's those people who've got to that stage where they've thought, right, there's more to it than this. I'm more than this, and my life is more than this. And then they sort of start looking, and it's interesting because I'm a bit pants at advertising, and you kind of have to do a bit of some kind of Inspector Clouseau exercise to find me, but people find me, and it's interesting sort of how people find me sometimes, but it's always at the right time. I have had people come and think they want to come and work with me, and they're not ready yet, and they'll maybe wait sort of 7 or 8 years, and then they'll come back, and that's always perfect too. I say that because I had somebody the other day who I'd worked with, I think 8 or possibly 9 years ago, and then they came back, and they were like different people. They were so ready. It was unbelievable. And if they pushed it, then it wouldn't have worked for them. They came and they got what they needed then, and that was perfect too.
Excellent. So what I'm hearing is that you're somebody who is happy to allow clients to arrive at the right time for them to meaningfully transform their lives in just the right way that they need.
Yeah. And I'm not beyond saying to somebody, this isn't for you at this stage. Sometime it might be, but it's not now.
Yeah, because it causes more damage than good, doesn't it? When things kind of come to fruition before they're entirely ready.
Oh, yeah.
Which kind of brings me on to like my next question for you, which is, what do you make of these times? What's it doing to you and your practice, and what's it doing to your clients? Because it really feels like something has been building for quite some time, and now this is the big event. This might be the first of many big events.
Well, I don't know whether it is the big event, but there's certainly, I've felt like from last year that we were already in the birth canal, head engaged and well through the birth canal. And my sense is at some stage, I get really clear ideas of what's coming or what's ahead, but I don't get time scales. I knew all of this stuff was coming. I knew, but I've also got a strong mind as well. So my mind every now and then goes, well, just a load of nonsense, which is fine. I don't mind that. I think that's really quite healthy. Otherwise you're away with the pixies and the fairies and forgot, I'm not saying that pixies and fairies aren't real, but it's good to be here as well. But I mean, last year I was getting very, very vivid dreams about, and I'm not going to go into some of the topics because they're quite contentious, and there's no point just triggering people. And that's the other thing I find quite interesting at the moment. It's just, it's really time now to find ways to connect with people rather than finding ways to be right. Super important at the moment. I sense, one of the things I sense, am I allowed to disclose that we had a sort of trial run earlier? Because we were recording earlier and then realized it wasn't recording. So, so I'm now sort of feeling slightly deja vu. One of the things we were talking about before is this is the time of great remembering. To be honest, I also have sensed for a long time it's time of reunification and wholeness. So we're coming back. It's not about this and that. It's not about right and wrong. It's not about good and evil. I've never really understood these kind of separations anyway. One of the biggest ones that we deal with in our culture is male and female. You know, and it's to be honest, I see so much violence perpetrated along those lines. You know, sort of violence against women. What's wrong with just not having, you know, sort of saying it's wrong to have violence against women? What about just saying it's wrong to have violence against anybody? And almost by separating, we make a lot of these things more possible. It would be, you know, when we remember that actually, you know, I look at you, Louisa, you're me. And equally, you look back at me, I'm you. You know, when we remember that we look at another, we're just simply looking at another ourselves. And you know, we're absolutely intrinsically linked. There's no possibility of us being separate. And yet we run so many stories that we are separate to allow ourselves to do things that we would never do if we remembered that. You know, slavery. If we could, if we remembered that actually, you know, these are other human beings like us, we would never have done slavery at all. You know, and the only way we could do that was to say that they weren't human, you know, just because of the color of their skin. You know, if you go back to Roman times, they had slavery then, and it was just because it was a different tribe. You know, it was okay to enslave another tribe because they were different. So all of these things, you couldn't, no one person could ever rape another if they knew that they were themselves. It's just not possible. So. And also there's it's a little bit more than that there, because you know, we do actually rape ourselves repeatedly. You know, we do terrible things to ourselves because we've forgotten who we are. So it's a combination of that separation and forgetting. So it is the time of remembering now, and it is the time of reunification. So I think it's amazing. I think it's absolutely amazing. Yes, there are going to be some dark things floating to the surface. There's undoubtedly, because they've been there all the time. And we do need to take our sort of blinkers off and actually look at what we've actually been co-creating, and get real about that and say, actually, time up, no more. It's really pretty simple.
So for people who are just waking up now, what advice do you give them for being able to cope with some of the horrors that might be coming up and the kind of resistance that might be rising up in them?
Okay, breathe. Biggest one, breathe.
I feel like I need to breathe just from asking that question.
The more we don't breathe, the more sticky we get. So the more stuff will stick to us. The more we breathe, it's not ours. Let it flow through. Just let it flow through. Just keep breathing and let it flow through. You know, yes, we have all been part of this co-creation. Whatever anybody wants to argue about that, we have all been part of it. You know, I always sort of think about, I always think money, power and energy, same thing. They're just forms of energy, really. So, and I always think money is a really nice analogy for power. It's more than that they're intrinsically linked. They are really the same thing. And if you think about us paying our taxes, we dutifully do what we're told. We pay our taxes, and these taxes are spent on all sorts, including killing innocent civilians and worse. So, you know, we all have blood on our hands. But we're also, I mean, this is where the wholeness comes into play, because we're all so incredible beings who are capable of such incredible things. So you've got that, but you've also got, you know, the things that we managed to create, and, you know, amazing inventions and adaptations, and just deep kindnesses. You know, we've all got that within us as well. So yeah, I'm really hopeful that finally we remember who we are, and that remembering is of something, you know, just brilliant. So
it's about breathing and kind of relaxing into it, and understanding that we have all been parts of the situation. You know, we've all got a shared responsibility within this world.
I don't think it's even as much as that, because if we actually, so breathing and embodiment are the two things really, because if we do that, then we're sorted really, because if we embody and show up fully, which, if we let go of the stories, I mean, I've got a trick. Can I share a trick?
Okay.
This only tends to work if people are predominantly visual, but I'll do a quick. Am I okay to do a quick test first? Just a little quick exercise. So if anybody's listening to this, just rest your eyes closed quickly. Don't do this if you don't like gorillas, because we've got a friendly gorilla involved. Anyway, so there is a gorilla right in front of you, and they're wearing a pink frilly skirt and a purple bowler hat. So just notice if you can see it immediately. Don't go searching for it, but just as soon as you see it. This is a friendly gorilla, and for the exercise, you like gorillas. It puts its hand out to shake your hand. You take its hand. If you can feel its hand, just notice that. If you can smell gorilla must, just notice that. If you can hear the gorilla breathing, notice that. If you can taste gorilla must on your tongue, notice that. Okay? Okay, and then just release the exercise. It's a really, just release the exercise and reopen your eyes and let the gorilla go off and play in its party frog. It's a really easy one, but it's pretty blunt, but it's an easy one just to test. Pardon?
What, to get you in your body? No.
This is just to test what your sort of predominant senses are. We've all got abilities to access all our senses, but most of us will favour one or possibly two of them. The most common, by all accounts, is visual, so seeing stuff. The second most common is feeling stuff. I'm a feeler, absolutely. You know, almost 100%. I'm doing more feeling.
Oh, really came up. I was going.
I don't see the gorilla. And then you get others who are about 50-50 feeler seers. They're about 50% each. I have worked with people who are hearers, and they just hear everything narrated. And I've worked with one person who tasted and smelt things. They got things that way, and they couldn't explain it to me. So I still am none the wiser how to understand that. But why I was asking that, because it is relevant in terms of taking the mind out a wee bit. If you're predominantly a seer, even if you're a seer feeler, you can get away with it a bit. It's basically giving them something to take their mind off things. So every time the monkey's coming, oh, yeah, well, I've got an opinion on this, and there's a story about that, blah, 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 blah. Give them a banana. Literally just put a banana in their mouth. They won't put up with it forever. You need to give them a proper job, but for the time being, it'll get them out of the way, so you can actually start actually being in your body and having a real experience of, you're really experiencing where you are. If you're a feeler predominantly, your monkeys won't put up with that. Then they just see through it. So, which is not meant to be a pun, but apparently it was. But it just gets them out of the way. Like I say, you do need to give your mind a proper job. It is trying its best, but it's doing jobs in our culture that it was never designed to do. So
can I interrupt you there? What was the mind meant to do?
Well, the mind is meant to just store information. That's it. It's meant to just bear witness and store information. That's all the mind is for. I always kind of use the analogy of the hard drive in a computer. This is before, in the good old days when they were quite simple and you had a DOS prompt. That for the young folks, they won't remember that. But you know, used to be able to, you could start up a computer, you could have, I've had this happen, so I know it works. You could have your hard drive fail and all your programs would still be running fine. You'd be thinking it was all working fine, but it just wouldn't save at the end of it. So so the hard drive is just purely a big fancy filing cabinet. It's just there to store information. It's not actually there to do the sort of the processing stuff. That's why the processor is separate. So you've got things like the VDU, you've got the things like the sort of the RAM, all these kind of things. They're all separate so that you can access them fast. If you put them all onto the hard drive, which you could do, it's just circuitry, it would just be slow as anything. It's like having an archive system and putting all the files that you need regularly in the middle of that archive system in alphabetical order. It would take you forever to find stuff. So what's happened is that our mind has forgotten that it's actually just meant to store information, and it's been given all these tasks like processing and stuff like that. So it's doing them to the best of its ability, but it's not what it's designed for. Does that make sense?
Yes. And do you think that we, like humanity, has been under a bit of a spell to identify more and more of the mind and be kind of overstimulated?
Well, this is where if I talk about embodiment, when we're in our mind, we're not in our body. Okay, so basically we just locate the premises. It's like having a control center and having a huge, enormous. Oh, I don't know. It's like having
our brain down here in our stomach. We should really be in our stomach brain, our first primary brain.
No? Well, just somewhere in your body. For different people, it's different places. For me, it's gut. But that's what works for me. It was funny. I heard somebody else saying that you shouldn't be in your gut because that's too emotive and too emotional, and then that leads you in other directions. But anyway, for me, that works.
Yeah.
But some people, it's down in their backside, or or in their genitals, and that if that works for them, that's great. But and then some people do get heart, but I think sometimes we're so trained into thinking it's all about the heart that we can get duped that way as well. So if we're getting real, we'll know where in our body we sense things, so that's fine.
So can I ask you about the great remembrance and the reunification, as you put it? What do you think? Where do you think we're going? Like, I've obviously got my ideas about what the remembrance is and what unification means, or reunification means. But for people who aren't familiar with those terms, what would you describe?
I'm not keen to attach too much to terms because I think everybody has their own language about stuff. So if somebody wants to call it diddly squat, that's fine too.
But what about if you were to
it's remembering who we are. For each of us to remember who we are, and all of us to remember who we are. So I'm saying there's no separation. So ultimately, it's the sort of the conglomerate of all existence. But each of us have got this kind of. I always sort of think it's like a sort of a human or animal body. And we're each individual cells within that body, but it's like the eye cells have forgotten that they've got any relationship to the blood cells, or any relationship to the stomach cells, and none of these could work on their own. And they're not working on their own, but they've just forgotten that that's the case.
So the remembering will be when we remember that we're all part, that we're all one.
Yeah, it's just that it's been so sort of hijacked, hasn't it, as such a sort of concept. But the other, it goes way beyond that, because we are actually all one throughout space and time as well.
Yeah.
So like we exist throughout all of existence as well. I don't know whether exist through all existence makes sense, but it's this is one of the things that is dissolving at the moment, is time. So, I mean, I started noticing this about 3 years ago. Clients were coming to me and sort of, I'd been aware of this in my own experience, but more and more clients were saying to me that they were having experiences from childhood, but it was like they were having them now. It wasn't just simply memories. They were literally having those experiences as if they were now, because they were. So time was starting. It was almost like before time dissolved completely, which it has done now. And we're still hanging on to the idea of time. Diaries don't work any other way, do they? But and my sense is technology will help us in this one, because at some stage it's going to get so unreliable that we have to start remembering who we are and rely on our inner knowing anyway. So that's fine. But yeah, so it was this kind of in between time where almost like this in between stage where time was kind of moving around. And it was just interesting watching. I tend to watch patterns, so I watch patterns a lot occur, sort of popping up amongst clients. And it was much easier then to work with them, just because, it's like, okay, we just bring it to us now. I've also worked with clients when they've been working with a different location. They've had to claim part of themselves from another country, and we just bring that country here. Which sounds batty. I mean, I've got a science background, so a lot of these things sound batty to a scientist, but at the same time, a true scientist mind is just curious about what is, rather than trying to force it into a model. So I tend to sort of go, okay, that's happening and that shouldn't really be happening. So how is it happening? That's fine.
Well, it sounds like you're honouring your clients' truths as well. So what they say is true for them is what you're going with.
Oh, well, absolutely. And especially because I do a lot of work through the body. So if bodies tell me they've experienced something, even if it doesn't make any sense to the mind, and, if I don't know, sort of, if I've never lived in Africa, but, if my body was absolutely adamant that I'd lived in Africa and something had happened to me there, then I trust that. If I was working with a client's body who said their mind was telling me, well, they'd never lived in, I don't know, Japan, but their body was absolutely adamant something happened to them in Japan, then I would trust that. So, and that comes down to a lot, especially if anybody's ever experienced trauma in their early life. The mind, this is where the mind is really kind. The mind will often soften a lot of those experiences if there's not a readiness yet to integrate it fully. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If somebody's had a very shocking experience in early childhood, or even just earlier life, that they're not quite ready to sort of integrate fully, then the mind is really good in spinning softer stories around it. It's almost like the oyster putting the pearl around the grit. So yeah. Can I just quickly mention about the embodiment, because that you asked about things that would support people. I will try and make this quick, because the run is helpful.
You don't have to make it quick at all.
No, it's just the easiest way in terms of that is really just to intend yourself to be fully in the body. But there's a sort of one that most people will be able to relate to, which is just, usually just finding a comfy spot and resting eyes closed, and then just filling the whole body up as if it's a funny shaped vase, with liquid essence of the soul that chose that body. So in my case, I would fill it with liquid essence of Gillian, being the soul who chose this body when she came in. And just filling every cell, every space between every cell, and every molecule and every space between every molecule, so everything is getting filled, and being really careful that even the bits that we think aren't part of us, so even sort of undigested food in our intestine, because for now, while it's there, it's part of us, making sure that's filled with liquid essence of the person themselves. The air in the lungs, even though it's going to be breathed out any second now, but still filling that with liquid essence. Saliva in the mouth, all of it, hair on the head, just making sure everything. If you hold that intention really strongly, it'll naturally do it. Once you get used to it, and once you realize how important it is, you'll tend to it'll be quite easy for you just to go, right, I'm in. But in the meantime, making sure there's no space. Because if we leave spaces, they tend to get occupied by things, and then it's like we've got lodgers, and they're just a pain in the neck at best. So they interfere, but the other thing is sometimes they can be a bit more malicious than that. So you just don't want it. You don't want the hassle. And it allows you then to be fully in your body, and then fully in your power. The sort of physical body, I kind of think of the analogy of the car battery. You know, these can be really powerful things. And as far as I understand, they're pretty simple. You know, you've got a lot of battery acid inside a container, a non-corrosive container, or a non-corroding container, and you've got a couple of electrodes on the top. If you take the container away, i.e. the physical body, you ain't got a functional battery. All you've got is a mess of battery acid that's going to eat into everything. So you know, it doesn't matter how powerful the essence of ourselves is, without the physical body, it's pretty much, it's not up to much.
Yeah. So you know, we need to look after our container then, don't we? And to fill it with the right stuff.
These are extraordinary things, absolutely extraordinary things.
Yeah, I could feel my body relax actually as you were, you know, I was imagining filling myself up while I was listening to you. Yeah, and it's actually a really soothing thing to do. I found it really quite relaxing. So what are your great realizations of this time, Gillian?
I don't know what our unusual realizations, because to me, this is normality we're coming into. This is my normal we're coming into, where it's a place of magic, and you know, where what we've set. I remember as a child knowing I could fly, knowing I could change matter, knowing I could move. I could move objects, but I also could move to different locations. Just, I mean, I sort of explained it as by the power of my mind, but also having this understanding that to do it was against the rules. And also I wasn't meant to tell adults about it, but I did tell adults about it, but apparently that was fine anyway, because they just went, there, dear, that's very nice that you can fly. But you know, adults are great in that regard, because they haven't got a clue, you know, in most cases, you know. So yeah, it was so yes, that was my world. I mean, I spent all my time down the fields playing with the fairies, and fairies were real. Of course they're real. You know, so to me, and I'm much more comfortable with the unseen world, much more comfortable, you know. Dead people can be awkward, but they're never as awkward as the living.
That's so true.
Never. Yeah, so, and I mean, you know, I've had people hissing and spitting and snarling at me, and that's not them, you know, in client sessions. It's not been uncommon for people in client sessions to actually wanted to kill me. So far, nobody has. I'm quite good at looking at stuff. But you know, so I have come up against some pretty sort of dark stuff, but it's so much easier in that, because it's, I don't know, it's just, maybe it's just because everything's possible there. You know, there's not all these sort of weird limitations that we put on ourselves.
None of those restrictions.
You know, well, a lot of the stuff that's going on at the moment is a huge analogy for that. You know, sort of, you've got to put masks on, you've got to stay home, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. Restrictions, you know,
kind of shut down our creativity.
Yeah, exactly. Cut off your wings, and you know, make sure there's no flying here.
Get off your brooms.
And that was the other I'm just remembering, actually, that was one of the things that has a lot of stuff from my childhood started reactivating in the last couple of years. And a lot of recurring dreams that I used to get. One of them was flying, and the flying dreams were, yeah, it was almost like I'd do sort of breaststroke, and I'd float up. I mean, like really up. I'd be up about sort of 4 miles up, and then I'd know I'd have to come down somehow. That was always a bit weird, because sometimes you couldn't control the speed you came back down. So that was always weird.
How I stopped. I would fly the same way. I would launch off in a kind of breaststroke and intend myself higher. But you're right, I can't actually remember how I landed ever.
Oh no, I do remember landing. It wasn't fun, because sometimes you really had to just sort of aim and hope.
Yeah.
And yeah, so but it was a lot of the time. So there was kind of two sorts of flying. Some of it was just levitating. So it was almost like if I got myself into a tricky situation, I would just rise above it. So sometimes I was literally just that distance. My feet would be that distance away from their reach, whoever they were. But I could always, it's quite an interesting one, because it definitely mirrors what I experience in real life. No matter how tricky things get, I can always kind of rise above it, if that makes sense. I can always kind of somehow, it's not rise above it because that sounds like I'm better than it, but it's almost like I can still keep myself intact regardless of what's going on.
Yeah, well, I think it's okay to protect yourself, isn't it? I think we've almost been conditioned into a lifestyle where the idea of defending yourself is seen as aggressive almost. But I think it's a basic human right that if something is attacking you, i.e. in a dream or in real life, that we should feel comfortable to put up a barrier or we should feel free to act in the way that we need to protect ourselves. And, there are lots of things going on right now, and we can protect ourselves etherically, physically. There's lots of different ways and feelings about it, but almost being muted a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I don't see it as protection. That's the whole thing. And I don't see protection as the way to go, because, to be honest, this is more separation than if it's about protection. It's
see that.
To me, it's more around about it. And this is where the embodiment thing comes in. If I sort of go back, I've done some work with lots of different people and some that talk about entities and stuff like that. And if people are freaking out at the idea of the term entity, if you just think about what literally the word entity means, it means a unit of. So it's just literally a unit of energy. But it's a unit of energy that's somewhere it shouldn't be. And it's, it's in the room, as they say in Scotland. To me, once you just embody fully, there's nowhere for things to go. So it's like it just deals with itself. And if we're in our full power, there's nothing going to bother us. Yes. So we don't need to protect ourselves then. We literally just stand in our power, stand in our center, embody, and it's dealt with. And to me, that was what the flying thing was. It was my way of just kind of, I didn't need to get into any engagement with anything. I literally just lifted myself out of it.
Yeah.
So that would be all it was. And it was like, there's no issue then.
Yeah. No, I get that. And you're right. We don't want to cause more separation at a time when we're trying to reunify. So, yeah, well, we've spoken about quite a lot. If somebody wanted to make contact with you or, speak to you about working with you, how can they do that?
Yes, so my website is www.sacred-touch.co.uk. And I realise I've got a lot of dark going on one side. No, it's that side. And that's my website. Probably one of the really nice things coming up at the moment, I'm offering a membership option at the moment. And it's an online membership. So it means that, space and distance doesn't matter. Time and space doesn't matter. This is me showing up in service to people and offering to hold them in a container over time. Because I do recognize this is quite a tricky time for a lot of people. There's a lot of freaky stories going on. But at the same time, I do sense that it's an extraordinary time too. So folks who have worked with me will know that from the time they commit to working with me to the time we complete our work together, I'm working with them the whole time. I get a lot of stories about that. That can include dream time if you call me in at that stage, but that's fine. And maybe just before we do go, I know we've talked about it a lot, but I'll just speak a little bit about dream working. But or dream walking, or however people call it. But yes, so the best way to do that, to join that, is an annual membership. So it's for the full 12 months, which started on the 1st of May. So it will end at the end of April 2021. And it's a really good deal, 250 quid for a whole 12 months of support. What the nuts and bolts of what you get, you can find on my website. It's the same website I said, www.sacred-touch.co.uk/membership. You can find all the information there. The reason I like to draw your attention to it now is because we've got our first group call tomorrow. So if you join after that, you'll have missed the first group call. So it'd be a bit of a shame. And there are other options if you want to join for less time, but financially it's not as favourable. And the other thing is you won't get the same support, obviously. So can I just mention about dream walking just very quickly? Because this is really the main way I function. And I didn't realize I was doing that. My mind's had a merry old life thinking it was something else. But anyway, but I kind of reconnected. Last year I reconnected with work I was doing really from when I was a baby, because I had memories of being doing it, being called to do it from when I was in the cot. And it's like my non-physical self goes off and does some work while my physical body is sleeping. So it's in that dream time. Sometimes it's called a shamanic process called dream walking. I've heard that. I think it's in some cultures it's called dream walking. This is definitely the main way I work. If I'm processing a huge amount of stuff, I also process a lot of energies that are coming into the earth. And if I'm doing that at any time, I'll find myself, I have to sort of go in. It's not normal sleep at all, but it's in, if somebody was looking at me, they'd think I was asleep. Because it's almost like it powers down all the unnecessary stuff so I can really work on what I'm working on. If that makes sense. So it's very easy to connect with me through the ether, so to speak. So
excellent. Well, I want to just absolutely thank you so much for being so generous with your time today and really, holding space and talking about what this time means to you, us, and what we can hope to realize from it. Thank you very, very much. If you found this discussion useful and interesting, then please do subscribe and follow this series. We're going to be introducing you to lots of different healers and therapists and practitioners and intuitives, and really sort of discussing around these subjects and trying to get greater clarity so we can just feel good and just be, as embodied and as calm and as prepared as we might be for this great remembrance, this in this time of great realizations. Anyway, thank you once again, Gillian. In the next episode, I'm going to be interviewing Scott Clover, an intuitive from New York. So if you'd like to know any more about that, stay tuned for Friday. Anyway, thanks a lot. Lots of love from Portugal and from Scotland. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Louisa.
Thanks for watching. If you've got any thing you'd like to share with us, then just pop something below in the comments field and I'm sure one of us will get back to you. Lots and lots of love. Bye for now.
Cheers.